I was brought up in a church that was very, I don't think they would have called themselves pro-Israel back in the 1950s, but they were. There was just this feeling, even as a kid, that somehow Israel as a nation, the Jews back in the land, that was right. And because the church had a very strong emphasis on biblical prophecy, that sense of rightness was linked to a belief that what was happening in Israel was what God said would happen. My parents had gone out for the night, and I was sitting in the television room, and a program came on, an old black and white program about the Holocaust. And there were these very graphic images from World War II and the liberation of the camps that came on the screen. Now, I don't remember any of the commentary about this historical program on the Holocaust. All I remember were the images and knowing that this was the Jewish people. And for somebody who had never known anything other than a pro-Jewish, pro-Israel atmosphere in our home, in the church, as an impressionable youngster, I was horrified. And even to this day, I can remember sitting all alone in this den, watching it, and I couldn't stop crying. I just cried and cried and cried and cried. And I was still in distress when my parents came home. And by this time, the program was over. And I remember, it's so vivid, I remember my mother saying, what's happened? Why are you crying? And I don't remember my exact words, but I said something to the effect that I never knew what had happened to the Jewish people in World War II. That was one of those pivotal moments and primal memories, if I can put it that way, that then shaped my thinking ever after. 1973, I went to Israel for the first time. And again, moments. I think life is filled with maybe not a lot, but key defining moments where your life afterwards is never the same that it was before. And I remember when the plane touched down in Israel and I got off the plane and my feet hit the tarmac, there was this very strong feeling of, I'm home. I am home. So in 2002, I was invited to take the charge that I'm in now at Deerfield Presbyterian Church. The congregation is probably the most peaceful and united that it ever has been. And at that point, the lady in the congregation invited me to this breakfast meeting. And she said, it's some guy talking about Israel, and I wondered if you wanted to go because I know you're very pro-Israel. And so we got there, and it turned out to be Victor and CUFI. We gave a good talk with plenty of visuals, and then at the end we had a Q&A, and afterwards he came over to where we were sitting, and I asked a lot more questions about Israel. And then out of the blue he said, next year in Jerusalem. And I said, what? I mean, what do you mean? And he told me about this pastor's trip that was coming up in January of the next year. This is only a few months away. And he said, we have some slots, and all you have to pay is $500, and would you like to go? Well, would I like to go? Come on. In that second trip, and I don't want to over-dramatize it because it's not, again, there were no visions, there were no ecstatic utterances connected to this, but it was as if a fire got lit inside of me. The love for Israel, the love for the Jewish people, that had been there since I was a kid. But it's like the intensity of that ratcheted up and became a major life theme. It's a level of intense belief that everything I knew as a kid is true, absolutely true. When anti-Israel things come up in the presbytery, which always filter down from what they call the General Assembly, that's the final court of the church. And so every radical piece of legislation that needs presbytery approval in order to become church law, anything that is anti-Israel, BDS agitation and that type of thing, we've always spoken out against it. But we are such a beleaguered minority now in that denomination that it doesn't appear to have any effect on the trajectory of the denomination. Again, this is not every individual minister, office bearer, or member, but the denominational voice is anti-Israel, pro-BDS. So it's almost as if in my own Nowheresville, South Jersey circle, it may be just a cheep that I utter from time to time, a cheep of protest. But you know what, Eric? It's my protest. I am not going to shut up. The only grouping I've found where that common passion is understood and embraced is in Christians United for Israel.